question is this House to now adjourn.
The question is that this House do now adjourn. Laurence Turner.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I know that there are a number of colleagues here who have experienced similar problems in their constituency to the issues that I'll be raising today, and I will try to be accommodating with interventions. May I also welcome the Minister to his place. Honourable members of different parties will, I am sure, welcome his statement in July that we fully understand people's concerns about the excessive deployment of telegraph poles and are urgently considering options to address this. Now, as time is short, I want to focus on the current absence of a requirement to consult with residents under the legislative and regulatory regime that ministers have inherited. This is not about being against telegraph poles, nor is it about being against the rollout of fast broadband. In fact, new infrastructure is vital in a society which is increasingly dependent on fast and reliable internet services. But it is surely wrong that when poles are cited inappropriately, that recourse to residents is advisory only, and in many cases it is lacking completely in practice. Now, official statistics suggest that in my constituency, Birmingham Northfield, almost 99% of residents have access to super-fast broadband. I do know that ministers have some scepticism over the accuracy of those figures, but it is undeniable that broadband coverage is better than in neighbouring rural areas, yet it is in the urban areas that the current focus of the rollout is occurring. In fact, the case for the changes in 2013, which established the current permitted development regime, focused almost exclusively on the need to extend superfast broadband to rural areas and new build estates. Little to no consideration appears to have been given to how this legislation would impact on already built up urban areas. The consequences are now being seen in South Birmingham, as some residents are left to accommodate poles that are unwanted, unneeded and obtrusive. I'll give way to my near neighbour and then to the honourable gentleman.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way, and it's a really excellent speech he's making, and it's much, much needed. Does he agree with me? The point he makes, actually, many of our constituencies have already got excellent broadband. This should be something that is strategically focused and prioritised in rural areas. In one of my streets alone, 5 poles. I've asked the government previously, how many poles do they think is acceptable? Does he agree that this is not the way that these providers should be behaving?
I know that the Honourable Lady has been doing extensive work on this issue. There are very similar problems in the Northfield constituency, and I would be sympathetic to having different approaches in rural, semi-rural and built-up urban areas precisely because of the issues that she raises. I'll give way to the Honourable Gentleman.
I want to thank my honourable friend for organising this excellent debate. It is also a key issue in my constituency of Halesowen. My constituents also support the rollout of high-speed broadband, but what they're concerned about is the installation of telegraph poles in areas which previously have not had telegraph poles in the past. Now, community engagement has not been done well. I give the example of the Squirrels estate in my constituency, where they recently ran a campaign that I supported, which was successful in stopping a company rolling out telegraph poles in an area that didn't previously have them. Their major concern was about the use of underground ducting. So does my honourable friend agree with me that if there is accessible infrastructure underground already, that broadband providers should be using that underground infrastructure, and the government should be changing the regulations so that they are able to share that infrastructure, even if they are competitors?
Well, I thank my honourable friend for the point he makes, and he highlights issues which are common across the wider region and, I suspect, common across the wider country. I'll come on to some of the regulatory changes which could be made, but I think it is important to recognise that there was a requirement for companies to share infrastructure wherever possible. However, there are cases, and I'll come on to it in my constituency, where that clearly is not happening. So, as I said, I wanted to draw attention to some of the problems in my constituency. I recently attended a residents' meeting in a street in Northfield called Pineview. This area is a quiet cul-de-sac set off from a busy road. It is a close-knit community, and over the years residents have invested their own time and money, considerable money, to ensure the upkeep of the area. They have lived with underground telecommunications infrastructure which serves different operators, and they've experienced positive service. But residents report that last year 4 telegraph poles were installed on this road, starting early in the day and finishing later at the night, with intrusive spotlights to facilitate the work. There was very limited community engagement, despite the residents taking up a suggestion by the company, Brisk, that a petition be collected. This was done, but to no effect. I draw attention also to Lavelle Close in Wheeley. This is another small cul-de-sac with only half a dozen houses and narrow pavements. The activities by 2 competing companies are now causing obstruction for residents and users of an adjoining public park. The hope that infrastructure would be shared is not being observed in practice, and there are ongoing problems of pavement parking across South Birmingham. Now, I know that transport ministers are looking separately at this issue in its own right, but the fact is that the combination of pavement parking and the loss of pavement space to poles has created obstructions and pinch points. This is a particular problem for those with prams and mobility aids. I'll give way to your lady in a moment. There are also problems in the Bourneville Conservation Area, which I've highlighted recently with Bourneville Village Trust, and I would like to place on record my thanks for the local representations that have been made to me in advance of this debate by councillors Esther Rye, Miranda Perks and Jamie Tennant in my constituency, and Liz Clements and Fred Grindrod in the neighbouring ward of Bourneville and Cotteridge. I also want to reference the work done on this issue by my honourable friend and neighbour, the member for Edgbaston, who, as she has highlighted, is addressing the same problems in her constituency, and my other constituency neighbour, the honourable and gallant member for Selly Oak, who is unable to speak in this debate as a frontbencher, but I know that he is addressing the same problems and that he has written to Ofcom on this matter. It is clear that there are issues in common and that a different way forward is needed. And I give way to my honourable friend.
Thank you for giving way. So similar in my constituency of Stourbridge in the West Midlands, we're also facing problems with the same company that are now causing havoc in your own constituency. As you rightly said, the legislation was passed in 2013, yet here we are in 2024 still waiting for the full rollout of this ultra-fast broadband. And while I appreciate what the honourable friend has said about we do have adequate fast speeds currently, it could be much better. In fact, when I was recently in Ukraine, I experienced far better internet connectivity than I do in central London and Stourbridge town centre. So our European neighbours are enjoying much faster broadband while we languish behind, and Stourbridge residents have been left at the mercy of these third-party companies.
I have made the point to members previously that interventions should be, the honourable lady might like to sit whilst I'm standing, interventions need to be short. They should be spontaneous. It is not an opportunity to come and read out a speech that has been pre-prepared. If she wanted to speak in the debate, she could have asked both the Minister and the member in charge for permission to do so, and that would have been acceptable. Laurence Turner.
Well, thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I agree completely with the points that my honourable friend made. Madam Deputy, sorry, very quickly.
Thank you, and I apologise, and I will be brief, Madam Deputy Speaker. I just wanted to wholeheartedly agree with the point that the Honourable Member for Northfield made on engagement. I still hold the letter in my hands that residents received from my predecessor with the promise from the company involved in rolling out these poles in Inkborough that the work would be initially done underground. Lo and behold, a couple of weeks later, poles appeared and work late into the night. So re-establishing and redoing the system on cooperation and engagement with the community is vitally important to regain trust moving forward.
I completely agree with my honourable friend, and he makes the case well. This is not about saying that there cannot ever be telegraph poles. There are some areas where it will be clearly the right solution, but there must be a proper process, and the companies cannot be left to mark their own homework, and he highlights the issues in his constituency well. Madam Deputy Speaker, one of the few requirements on network operators is to provide 28 days notice in writing to the local planning authority when they propose to put up a pole. This is a very low bar, And without commenting on an active investigation, it should be noted that Ofcom is currently investigating one company, Brisk, over an alleged failure to notify Birmingham City Council 28 days prior to installing poles, and it is important that that investigation be concluded quickly. Now, I understand that the industry body, the Internet Service Providers Association, who provided a briefing ahead of this debate, which I thank them for, are currently working on a potential revision to the Cabinet and Pole Siting Code of Practice. The point that I will make in this debate, and I do hope that we will hear some encouraging comments from the Minister, is that as long as the code remains voluntary, it will always be circumvented in some cases. Now, the Code of Practice merely states that following advice for engagement and consultation with residents, the code operator should place a site notice in as close a proximity as possible, or if an appropriate place to cite a notice is not available, another means of informing residents may be discussed and agreed upon. In seeking to address these concerns, a number of residents in my constituency have, individually and collectively, attempted to follow the steps, including the complaints process, which is set out in the Code of Practice. However, on this issue, once more, the Code of Practice, in its current form, fails to provide sufficient redress. And as I say, it does state that a complaints procedure should be in place. Again, this fails to go further than a company providing written responses detailing the reasons why the complaint is accepted or rejected. This, Madam Deputy Speaker, is frankly not good enough. We must concern ourselves with the prevention of poor practice as well as encouraging the best. So I asked the Minister today, and I thank him for his engagement with honourable members across the House on this issue already. Does he agree with me that in pursuit of the welcome manifesto commitment for a renewed push to fulfil the ambition of a full gigabit coverage by 2030, that a better code of practice is needed? Does he agree that there is a natural conflict of interest in making broadband companies the sole arbiters of their own practice? And does he further agree that there should be a role for Ofcom in upholding the code? So I thank the Minister for his attention to this important issue. It'd be welcome to him set out how he proposes to engage with members across the House on this issue, and I'm sure that we'll all hear more about this problem across the course of this Parliament.
Sir Christopher Bryant.
Thank you very much. And might I just say, because it's the first time I've seen you in the chair, that how glad I am to see you elected to this post, and I voted for you. So there. It's a secret ballot, so you can't check. Can I first of all congratulate my honourable friend, first of all, on getting elected. It's good to see him in his place. And I might just say, I think I'm right in saying that Kings Norton is a part of his patch. He may not be aware that one of the shields up on the wall over there is for a former member for Kings Norton who was killed in the Second World War. He was a very, very brave man who fought for his country and died effectively making it possible for everybody to evacuate. Ronnie Cartland was his name. He was a Conservative. But his first rebellion was when he was angry that the government wasn't doing enough for the distressed areas, including the distressed areas of South Wales, including my constituency. So I feel I have a sort of affinity with his constituency, and I hope he's not going to be rebelling. I hope that I haven't prompted him to rebel instantly. But I'm also delighted that we've got this opportunity to have this debate because, look, I mean, I will be very clear. The vast majority of companies who are operating in this sphere are doing so entirely responsibly. They are doing a great favour for the nation in rolling out broadband of the kind of speed that everybody wants. And I note the point that was made by my honourable friend for Stourbridge about other countries in Europe. Of course, we want to aspire to that as well for everybody across the whole of the UK. The vast majority of companies are doing that. A few are, frankly, behaving like cowboys. And I think sometimes we need, as government and as Parliament, to say to cowboys that they're drinking in the last chance saloon. I have made this abundantly clear to some of the operators, and I know that some of the operators who are striving, first of all, to cooperate one with another and with BT Openreach, and to make sure that there is no unnecessary street furniture suddenly appearing in a street. Those companies who are doing that and are making sure that they have full consultation with the local community before any extra, either the road is dug up to do a new duct or a new pole appears, those companies who are abiding by the Code of Conduct and are fulfilling all of their obligations are, I would say, almost as fed up as my honourable friend and all the other honourable friends, and we could indeed, I'm sure, have filled the whole chamber today with honourable members who are equally fed up. They are fed up with the few companies who are bringing the whole system into disrepute. And this matters because, in the end, the most important thing for us is that the wider strategy is right. We want to be able to deliver good value, very high speed, i.e. more than ultra-fast, gigabit-capable broadband based on fibre to the whole of the UK as fast as possible without having to provide vast amounts of taxpayers' money, and therefore to do so on the basis of commercial rollout. And of course it is right that that should not be on the basis of monopoly. Of course it is right that competition, where it can, is able to drive choice for consumers and cheaper prices. So all of that part of the strategy is absolutely right. The bit of the strategy that I think the previous government was a bit more relaxed about was the element of trying to do so without additional. In fact, government ministers previously used to say categorically they were completely relaxed about overbuild. But overbuild meaning several companies either digging up the road one after another, which is what has happened in some parts of the country, or several companies deciding that they needed their own set of poles, or poles in an area where there had never previously been poles and where ducts had already been laid out and were not being used. So I'm not completely relaxed about overbuild. I'm concerned about it because I know an awful lot of constituents up and down the land are. However, I want to make sure that the commercial operators who are abiding by the rules and by the Code of Conduct have every opportunity to continue doing so that we do continue to deliver, so that they don't have their commercial investments disrupted unnecessarily, and also so that we can deliver the kind of infrastructure that we need across the whole of the United Kingdom, because in the end, I want the cheapest possible prices for people and the highest possible capacity across the network to every single property in the land. I would just issue one slight corrective in this debate, which is that sometimes people say that this is a battle between urban and rural. Actually, some of the issues in urban areas are completely different from those in rural areas. Sometimes they're absolutely identical. And so I'm not sure that dichotomy is a fair one. Having made the points I've made, my preference is obviously for ducts wherever possible. That isn't always possible for a whole series of different logistical reasons in different areas. And it is an undeniable fact that a pole or providing connectivity via poles is likely to be something like 10 times cheaper than ducts. So I fully understand why commercial operators would want to install poles in areas. And I understand that sometimes that means that there will be poles in areas that have never had poles before. I think in some areas that is something that we are going to have to live with, of course.
I thank him for giving way, and I agree with almost everything that he said, and also I'd like to reflect the moving tribute that he made to a predecessor member for Birmingham, Kings Norton. I do understand the case that he's made, and I welcome his comments. Would he accept that when the price of poles is already cheap, that in order to reach lower margins, there is a risk of some companies undercutting each other on consumer service, and that really is at the heart of the issue that we're debating today. It's those operators and those local cases where those standards haven't been followed, and that good network providers should have nothing to fear from the changes that have been suggested tonight.
Yes, I agree with every word that he just said. I mean, it's extremely well put, and he probably ought to be the minister. but maybe he will be soon. He's right. I also want to say shared infrastructure wherever that is possible. And of course, legislation already makes provision for some of that to happen. I have laid it down quite firmly in speaking to the operators that we need to enhance that infrastructure. You can perfectly understand why a commercial operator would want to go, well, I'm not sure that I really want to share with my competitor. I understand that. That's why I think it's taken quite a while for them to get to a new code of conduct. I very much hope that that new code of conduct, which I've already discussed with them, will be laid out very soon. There is a matter of urgency about this because, of course, this rollout is happening this week and next week and the week after. And we need to tackle these issues in short measure, not wait a long period of time. But I think at the very latest, this will be published in the early new year. And I would encourage everybody in that sector to abide by that. I would also encourage competitors to tell the 2 or 3 companies that are not really playing by the rules, that they are bringing the whole of the rest into disrepute. And the danger of that is the single most important issue for most of these operators is how are they going to drive take-up? Not just rollout, that's their investment. It's take-up. Because lots of people have no idea. When we talk about 100 megabits per second or gigabits or whatever, they have no idea what we're talking about. And the truth is, all of us, all of our homes, all of our businesses are going to need much greater capacity on broadband in the near future. So we do have to roll this out. We do have to make sure that people understand why they need it. But the danger is, if this whole process undermines confidence in the rollout, it's going to affect take-up. So I think this is in the commercial interest of everybody to make sure that we come to a better set of solutions in this area. If I could just go through a couple of the specific things that he raised. As he knows, the Cabinet Siting and Pole Siting Code of Practice was issued in November 2016, and it sets out the guidance on best practice relating to the deployment, encouraging operators to site apparatus responsibly and engage proactively with both local authorities and the local community. And he laid out some of the specifics that follow on from that, the 28 days that need to be notice that need to be given to local councils and so on. And indeed, there are other operators, not the ones that he's talking about, IX Wireless, for instance, who I've just had in my office earlier on this afternoon, who are operating a different model. And there are a different set of issues that relate specifically to them. And there too, I've tried to make it very clear what government expectations are in this field. And as I say, following a meeting that I've had with the operators, the industries have committed to revising that code of practice. I think it will be much tougher. And that guidance should be published in the new year. But I'm absolutely clear about this. If this does not work, if voluntary adherence does not work, we reserve the right to change the law. We are in earnest about this because we are aware of the concerns that people have expressed. He's also right to say that Ofcom has stated that it would investigate any cases where poles are sited in a way which is not consistent with the requirements and guidelines in place, including where they block residents' drives or where operators systematically fail to engage with local planning authorities' suggestions. And, of course, as he has already referred to, Ofcom has opened an investigation into whether BRSK have failed to comply with its obligations. I'm very keen to have a meeting with BRSK as well, and I hope that that's going to happen in the next few weeks. I don't want to interfere in the process that Ofcom are engaged in because that's a matter for them, and I wouldn't want to seek to undermine what is effectively a quasi-judicial operation. But I do want to make sure that BRSK fully understand not only the concerns of many Birmingham MPs, I also noted my Right Honourable friend from Birmingham, Edgbaston's contribution earlier, but I do want to make sure that they understand the government's concerns in this field as well. Madam Deputy Speaker, I do commend my honourable friend on getting this debate so early in his time as a Member of Parliament. He's obviously going to be a doughty defender of the rights of his constituents, and I noticed that you were nodding along, and I know you're not really allowed to nod along, but you were you're now you're shaking your head as well. You're not allowed to do that either, but nonetheless, I think you broadly agreed with the thrust of what I was saying, so I feel as if I've united the House, and on that note, I will bid you farewell.
The question is that this House do now adjourn. As many as are of that opinion say aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it. The ayes have it. Order, order.